CNN has learned the Pentagon will be asked to okay plans to house thousands of immigrants, including unaccompanied children, on 2 military bases in Texas. This comes as lawmakers are getting a first-hand look inside immigration detention centers. Some of them have children separated from their parents at the border. Congresswoman Jackie Speier toured 2 of those centers, and she joins us now. Congresswoman, good to have you with us. After visiting the Port Isabel ICE Detention Center, among others, you called this, for all intents and purposes, a prison over the weekend. Why did you call it a prison?
The women were shackled as they were brought into the facility. They're in prison garb, and there's barbed wire all over the facility. So that's a prison. And the facility inside, we met with about 40 women, all of whom said the following. They had been there for 3 weeks, some as much as a month. They had 60% of the women had not had a conversation with their children. Many of their children were taken from them without their knowledge while they were in their court proceedings. They never had a chance to say goodbye. They don't know what the A number is for their child. So it is an absolute disaster, and it shows the level of incompetence in the way the administration rolled out this program and the inhumanity as well.
Were these women, did they know where their children were?
No, they have no idea where their children are. I think only 2 or 3 of them had actually talked to their children.
We've heard a lot of outrage from your fellow lawmakers who have also visited facilities, even lawmakers who have not been there, calling for more answers here, understandably, and those calls coming from both sides of the aisle, we should point out. What do you believe you can do there in Washington to get some of those answers?
Reunification has got to be our sole focus right now. No child should ever be taken away from his or her parent. The American Academy of Pediatrics, Dr. Kraft has said over and over again that it creates toxic stress, that it's irreparable damage, and that it impacts the architecture of the brain. Do we need to know any more? Is wrong. This is the most diabolical approach that you could ever imagine. This is not America, and we will not be remade in President Trump's image.
Sarah Sanders saying again yesterday that Democrats need to work to fix this when talking on a broader level about immigration, but this falls under that umbrella as well. How do you respond to that?
Well, I respond to that with this answer. Zero. The whole zero policy that has been put in place has been the reason why we're at this place right now. 6 weeks ago, they weren't being separated from their kids. They are now. And all the president has to do is revoke this policy. And if they're willing to do that, we're going to step right up and help them. But let me also point out that this effort to make these camps is incredibly costly. And you're far better to place these families, and most of them have families in the United States, place them with their family members, put ankle bracelets on them. That's $5 a day as compared to $350 a day or $750 a day in some of these tents.
But let me bring you back to, especially when we talk about reunification. What do you believe Congress can do? Is there anything that Congress can do to step in here? Because there are legitimate questions about not just the numbers, but where they are, how the reunification is going to happen. And if we're not getting those answers from the White House, can you reach across the aisle? Can you do it within your own party? Do you feel there's something that you can do to put pressure to get those answers and to get those families back together?
Well, the reason why 25 members of the House went down for McAllen just last weekend was because we want to put a spotlight on this issue. We wanted to see if they were being housed in cages, which they are, whether or not these detention facilities were more like prisons, which they are. I also went and saw one of these tender care facilities where actually children were being cared for well, but again, not with their parents. So what Congress can do is put a spotlight on it. We can ask for a GAO report, but all Sessions has to do, our Attorney General, is to revoke this particular policy. And the president knows that, but they want to stir up their base, and they think this is a winning strategy. Meanwhile, families are truly being destroyed.
Let's talk about this so-called compromise bill in the House, which, as we know, is not expected to pass. But based on our own reporting, there could be a more narrow bill that would essentially overturn Flores here. Is that something that you could support?
Well, Flores requires that the children be in the least restrictive settings, and that you can't house them for more than 20 days.
Right.
The question becomes, do we want now to turn these various facilities into internment camps for these families, or do we want them to be able to stay with their family members, put a ankle bracelet on them, far less expensive?
So is that the only solution for you then, that they are not housed in detention centers?
Well, I think the cost alone is draconian. I mean, create more judges. I mean, we need probably twice as many judges as we have right now. Increase the opportunity for the asylum claims to be made and be reviewed by judges, and let these families be reunited.
Before I let you go, I do want to get your take on this. You told my colleague, or Aaron Burnett, last week after Secretary Nielsen was confronted at a restaurant that, in your words, everyone has the right to have dinner where they want. And you went on to say this as well.
I do know that if you foment hate, as the president does on a daily basis, in his base, it also creates a reaction by others. We need to recognize that if we want to be known as something other than ugly Americans, we've got to act like beautiful Americans. And right now, that's not coming out of the administration.
I know that in response to what happened over the weekend, you tweeted your support for Sarah Sanders, but then we saw what your colleague Maxine Waters said. And even as she has come out to try to defend it, there is still a good amount of criticism being sent her way. Is she behaving in the way that you would like to see a so-called beautiful American, as you point out?
I want everyone to tone down the rhetoric. I want the president to be the first. He's the leader of this country. He's got to stop calling people names. He's got to respect the members of Congress, both in his party and in the Democratic Party, and we've got to find ways to find and seek common ground. But
have you reached out to Maxine Waters about this?
No, I haven't talked to Maxine yet. We just returned to the House last night. But
do you plan to?
Sure, of course. I'm happy to talk with Maxine. No one tells Maxine what to do, however. But I would say to her that this does not serve our purpose nor the American people's purpose. And I think everyone has the right to be able to dine in restaurants, regardless of your political affiliation. I don't want to be kicked out of a restaurant because I'm a Democrat, and Sarah Sanders shouldn't have been kicked out of the Red Hen because she's a Republican.